Hello YouTube friends, this is the seat, driver's seat out of my Saab 9.3. It's got a failed heat mat. Now I've done a separate video on how to get it out, but now I'm going to show you how to put a new heat mat in it. Now most seats in most cars are made in much the same way. The leather or cloth covering is stretched over the frame and the foam and is clipped into the frame, usually with something similar to these plastic sections that are sewn onto the covering. As you can see, the section is shaped so that when it clips over the frame it has a kind of grip. As a result, what you'll find is you really need to get a small screwdriver behind to open it up and pull one end, get one end off the frame. Once you've got one end off, it'll come away along the rest of its length, and just continue working your way around, doing the same at all the sections. The longer sections are a little harder to pull off. You might need to get something behind or use a pair of pliers or grips to pull it off with. Now you will need to take this side trim off. The hand wheel here for the recline can simply be levered off. It's only clipped on, as you can see. Take the cap out of the centre of there, and as you can see, there's a torque screw. Obviously your seat may be different, but on this particular seat this comes off with a TX30 here. Has a TX20 screw in the back as well. It also has a clip at the front here. I'm going to loosen that off. And now you'll be able to see what we do now. Roll the leather or the cloth covering up over the now behind the trim lines on each side there's wire sewn into the joint, and there's wire in the foam, and they're held together by something called hog rings. You can get two pairs of pliers and separate them, but frankly the easiest way to deal with them is to get a half decent pair of cutters that are capable of cutting thin steel. Do be careful to recover both pieces when you've done. At the end, when we put this seat back together, I'm going to use tie wraps in place of these hog rings. Once you've cut the hog rings, a pair of fine nose pliers is very useful for getting hold of them and unhooking. Now that we've got the leather peeled back, we can see the problem. The heater element has got some kind of short or other issue where it's been overheating and burning in there. It's also burnt the back side of the leather, as you can see. Now this heat mat is held in with self-adhesive tape, so I'm not going to bother removing the old one. In this particular instance, it turns out the front portion of the mat came off quite easily. It was only stuck on across the front, so I've been able to take the front section out. It also turns out, as it happens, looking at the part numbers, that whilst this is a sports seat, I've actually got a heat mat for a standard seat. And I'm not going to bother taking the rest of the mat off, because as you can see, where you pull the sticky off, it actually pulls the top surface of the foam off, so you're damaging your foam. So it is much easier overall to put the new mat over the old one. You can see here now the part numbers. This one is the sports seat mat, which I've just taken out. This one is for the standard seat cushion. Undoing the electrical connector, you need to squeeze in these two wings from the side, and then you can pull it out. You might it is very small, very fiddly. You might find the use of a small 2 or 3 millimeter screwdriver or a pair of pliers useful in this application. I'm going to start from the front to fit the new one. The cable, there's a slit in the foam for the cable, and there's a little recess for the control box to go into. That's better. So don't forget to tuck into the creases, because that's where the wires on the back of the leather will go in, and that's where the hog rings were. So you need to tuck that in, because you don't want to pull it in and tear it with the wires. So, and now I'll work my way round with the sticky. The sticky there will hold that into place. Also, you definitely don't want to tear that region, because of course the heat wires hop over that gap as well. Smooth it down to the back, and then as I do so, I will make sure that portion with the sticky goes on square. Pull open the gap for it, where the wires hop across the gap. Now, this being the standard seat heat mat, you can see the wires don't extend as far forward as the sports one. The sports one comes all the way to the front here, but never mind. Pull this as far forward as I dare without straining the rear end. Now the heat mat is on, it's time to be putting it back together. As I mentioned earlier, instead of using hog rings to put this back together, I'm going to use cable ties. And the best way around, I think, to put them in is with the zipper outwards, so that when it goes round the cable, it comes inside, and then you push it out and pull it out to lock, like this. You'll also find that it's near impossible to feed them through by hand, so a pair of fine nose pliers will come in very handy. When you bring this wire down to zip through, pass it round that wire, zip it that way, zip it that way, zip it up. Now, when you've done that, be sure to push the wire round so that the locking mechanism is down in the depths of the foam and not sat up at the top, because you might feel that when you sat in the seat, particularly in this row here. Use reasonably strong zip ties. Also make sure that you get all the bits of hog ring that you've cut out of the foam. Nasty little blighters those. The last thing you want is for them to stick up out of the foam, poke through the seat covering and give you a puncture in the arris. On these positions across the seat here, I suggest you feed it in so that the lock is at the front and that you end up feeding it from the back, because then as you pull it down into position, it's easier from the front. You can pull it from the front to lock it up. Also, as I mentioned before, make sure that this block gets right down in the bottom of the foam channel. There should be little holes in the material where the hog rings went. You can probably reuse those. Feed the tail end through and then into the locking mechanism. Again, you may well find those pliers come in handy there. It's not so bad across this row here, just got this end one to do, but you'll find that it's very awkward and very fiddly down these sides. I'm using 150mm, so roughly 6-inch long cable ties. If you can get longer ones, then I would suggest that you do. And of course, don't forget to cut the tails off. So I've tied all the hog ring areas down now with cable ties. So now I need to fold the leather back over the foam from whence it came. Now, one thing you'll notice is that the foam is quite loose on the seat. In fact, if you were to take the leather off completely, the foam would just lift off. When the leather gets all hooked down onto the seat, that's actually what holds the foam into place. And now, all we need to do is hook these plastic runners back into place on the frame. As luck would have it, it's an awful lot easier to put back than it was to get off. And just continue round, do that all round. You'll find too, particularly down the side where the plastic clips on, the frame sometimes has little notches in it, sometimes at each end, which guide these into position and make sure as well that there's enough stretch in the leather to keep it taut over the foam and not allow this section to just slide forward and end up with a baggy cover. So push this trim back into place. Height adjuster lever, make sure you get that into position so that it locks and it won't move. Tighten the screw back down. Clip the screw cover in. Now there's 3 holes on here that little pins engage into, and there's clips between them. There we go. Make sure it works. Yes, it does. So now the seat's ready to go back in the car. I'm going to take the opportunity as well just to give some of the framework a quick dusting down whilst the seat is out. Clean down some of those places that you normally can't get to.